Good morning, everyone. It's 9:30 a.m. Chairperson Hall, are you out there? Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Commissioner Maestas, Chairwoman Hall will be with us in 1 second. Sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
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 Shall we get started? Okay, this is today is Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. This is the regular weekly open meeting for the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. I'm Chair Cynthia Hall, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. The time is 9:33. So let's have a call to order and a roll call, please. Who's taking a roll call?
I will do that.
Thank you, Michael.
Commissioner Hall,
Here.
Commissioner Fishman, Commissioner Maestas,
I'm here.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Here.
Commissioner Byrd.
Present.
We have 4 commissioners present. That constitutes a quorum.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now let's have the pledge. How about, could we have Hans Muller do the pledge?
Certainly, Chair Hall. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Thank you, Hans. So let's go to consideration and approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda that anybody wants to propose today?
I'm Chair.
Yes.
Russell Fisk has asked that we remove item 6 from the agenda.
Yes, Madam Chair, that's the EP matter 19-00099 UT and 19-00348 UT. I'll bring that back next week.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much, Russell. Any other changes? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Yes,
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's have the vote, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
and just checking, Commissioner Fishman, are you present? Does not appear Commissioner Fishman is,
No, he's present. I can see him.
oh,
I
okay.
think he's probably trying to get his audio to work. Steve, we can't hear you. Michael, what do you suggest?
Well, it is only approval of the agenda and we could move forward and
Oh, wait, now it says connecting to audio.
Good morning, Commissioner Fishman.
Well, we could move on and then he could let us know what his vote is that once we can hear him. Michael, would that work?
well, I think we have a majority that's already approved the agenda, voted
Yeah,
to
okay.
approve the agenda. So I don't think there's a necessity to do that. We can just move
Right.
forward.
I agree with you. And besides that, we just lost his audio, so I don't know. I mean, his video, so. Let's move on.
So
All right.
I would just note that we have 4 votes to approve the agenda. So the agenda is approved.
Okay, great. Thank you. So moving on to item number, Roman numeral 4, introduction of special guests. We have Mr. Jerry Valdez, I'm sorry, Executive Director of the New Mexico Department of Transportation, providing a presentation on an overview as entitled, an overview of the New Mexico electric vehicle infrastructure plan, which I'm very interested in hearing. So, is
Madam
Mr.
Chair?
Valdez? Yes, Vice Chair.
If I may just tee this up,
Okay,
I had this added to the agenda, so I think it's timely. As you know, Mary Jane Parks is taking the lead in our transportation electrification rulemaking. And very proud of the state of New Mexico. We were one of the first states to submit the required EV infrastructure plan to pave the way, no pun intended, for federal funds for transportation electrification. And we thought it'd be fitting for Jerry Valdez, the executive director, to make a brief presentation on that EV infrastructure plan.
okay. That
Mr.
sounds
Valdez, take it away if you're here.
I don't see his name. I suppose we could come back to this item.
Yeah, let's see. Maybe he's late in logging on. If someone, maybe Mary Jane, if you could ensure that he's got the
Right link.
Zoom link for the meeting,
Sure, I'll check real quick. Thank you.
and then we can come back.
Yeah, let's do that. We can move on to public comment, item Roman numeral 5. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment this morning?
Madam Chair, I do not have anyone signed up for public comment. If there is no one in the hearing room that wishes to make public comment that has appeared in person, there is no one signed up today.
Thank you very much. All right, item Roman numeral 6, consideration and approval of prior meeting minutes. These would be the minutes of September 21, 2022 open meeting. Does anybody have any additions or changes or corrections to the minutes?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Byrd.
I will move the minutes as presented.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second? Anyone?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Maestas. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none. Let's take a vote.
Commissioner Fishman, since I note he is present now. Or he was.
You
Can't
know,
hear you, Steve.
we could tell him to hold up one finger for yes and aye, one finger for aye and two fingers for nay.
No,
Okay.
be very selective on that finger.
He says aye. All right, go ahead, Mike, please.
Okay, Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
and Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
The vote is 5-0 to approve the minutes of September 21, 2022 open meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. All right, now we'll move on to Roman numeral 7, consent action items. Mike, would you care to read out the captions?
I will. The consent action items consist of transportation matters, case 22-00204-TREN in the matter of the investigation of flying C, T, and G wrecker service. It's a potential order on a recommended decision. Case 22-00234-TRM in the matter of the application of Transportis Domar LLC for a certificate to provide general shuttle service. That's a potential order on the application. Case 22-00236-TRM in the matter of the application of Town of Tatum for reissuance of certificate number 12706 to provide ambulance service, and that's a potential order on the application. The utility matter on the consent agenda is case 21-00281 UT in the matter of the joint application for the location approval of the expanded Corona Wind Project and the revised Corona Gen-Tie system, and for right-of-way width approval pursuant to the Public Utility Act, NMSA 1978, section 6293. Ancho Wind LLC, Cowboy Mesa LLC, Guyanus Mountain Wind LLC, Mesa Canyons Wind LLC, Pattern SC Holdings LLC, Viento Loco LLC, joint applicants, and that's a potential order for a response. I will take the, actually, sorry, I'm reading it first, so I'll let you, the motions be made first.
Oh, yes, that's right. Okay, any changes, corrections to the consent action addenda? Hearing none. I need a motion, folks.
Move to approve as presented.
Thank you,
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mike, can you take the roll?
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
Can't read your lips, but you can hold a finger. Thank you. I think that's an aye. That is an aye. All right, Mike, go ahead, please.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Consent action agenda items are approved by a vote of 5-0.
Okay, let's see. Do we have Mr. Valdez again yet? By any chance?
This is Mary Jane. I do not see him.
All
Right
right,
now, he's not present.
all right. No problem. We'll hear from him when we hear from him. Let's proceed to the regular action items. That's Roman numeral 8 on our agenda. Under heading A, we have no transportation matters. Under heading B, we have several utility matters. Next week, the next matter is item number 5. The case number is 21-00177 UT. in the matter of a commission rulemaking regarding New Mexico Public Regulation Commission Rule 17.5.440. Oh man, for the 440 rule. You know, I think we should take this matter up at the end of the regular action items, because I know Commissioner Fishman wanted to present that. And presently, we can't get it. He can't get his audio operating. He says no. Okay. Steve, can you, this is too hard. You want us to just proceed? Okay, fine.
Maybe Commissioner Fishman should just call in, and that way he'll be
Yeah.
audio only through the phone.
Yeah, that's much better.
That's an option.
Can somebody please send him the telephone number to call? Okay, he's saying yes to that. All right. So I think what we could do, well, folks, we can either take a break or we can move on to the next case while Steve's getting his telephone number. What?
I would say move to the next case, and then we can come back to this.
Yeah, okay. We'll go to item number 7 at this point. The case number is 22-00097-UT. In the matter of applications for the 2022 broadband program support from the State Rural Universal Service Fund as per 17.11.10.31 NMAC. Russell Fisk will present the potential order extending the deadline for the Commission's disposition of applications and related deadlines to coordinate with the Office of Broadband Access and Expansion and the Connect New Mexico Council. Russell, if you could please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. All right. So as you know, Commissioners, legislation that was passed in the 2021 legislative session, there were 2 major bills with regard to broadband access expansion. And one was the Connect New Mexico Act, which created the Connect New Mexico Council. And the other was the Broadband Access and Expansion Act, which created the Office of Broadband Access and Expansion within NMPRC. And as part of those, the primary responsibilities of those entities is to coordinate broadband efforts, broadband spending efforts at a statewide basis. And at the same time that those bills were passed, one of the bills also amended the Rural Telecom Act. The SRUSF, the State Rural Universal Service Fund section of the Rural Telecom Act, to require the Commission to coordinate with the Connect New Mexico Council and with the statewide broadband plan. Now, the statewide broadband plan is still in development, or I believe Mike Ripperger described it as being updated. And that's something that the Office of Broadband Access and Expansion, which they refer to as OBI, it's still still in development, or it's being updated, or there isn't a statewide broadband plan. Plus, those 2 pieces of legislation, the Connect New Mexico Act and the Broadband Access and Expansion Act, had to do with use of state money. And of course, federal infrastructure money has come in, a lot of federal infrastructure money for a lot of it for broadband. So OBI has become sort of the organizational center for a lot of that spending too. I don't believe they're making final decisions in terms of managing the money, but NMPRC, even before OBI was created, had created a statewide broadband map, a very detailed one, So they have the information, and they're the ones who know, where are the areas that need to be, the geographical areas that need to be addressed in terms of broadband access, and they know where certain infrastructure is that can support further broadband expansion. So, as you know, a few weeks ago, Mike Ripperger gave a presentation to the commission about telecom staff's efforts and contacts with mostly OBI. But OBI is very much in contact with the Connect New Mexico Council. And Mike Ripperger also described, he's been viewing the Connect New Mexico Council meetings. They now meet once a month. And I've also been on calls with, or meetings, Zoom meetings with both of those entities, OBI and representatives of the Connect New Mexico Council. For instance, the last, I sent the commission, I guess it was probably 3 weeks ago, an update about our most recent discussion, our Zoom meeting with mostly members of OBI, but also a representative of the Connect New Mexico Council, who happened to be Luis Reyes, the CEO of Kit Carson Electric Co-op, which has an internet division. As you know, they were one of the sort of the first movers in northern New Mexico, at least, to build, to expand into providing broadband internet service. Using their existing fibers and rights of way for electricity. And so he's a member of the Connect New Mexico Council who was on the most recent Zoom meeting that we had with OBI. Okay, so that's background. We've been making these sort of what we call informal coordination efforts. Because, as I said, there isn't a statewide broadband program or plan for us to simply take from OBI and sort of follow. But we're working with them on informal coordination for this year, because we provided to OBI earlier in the year all 43 of the applications, which are of course publicly available on our own e-docket, that have been filed for broadband funding this year, so that they could review them. And I think they even brought in extra people to review them, like someone from the school, the educational facilities department, because they're working on broadband expansion, and members of OBI, and so. In our last discussion that we had, last Zoom meeting we had, I informed the OBI that, in terms of getting any input from them for this application cycle, that our rule had a deadline of October 15th for the commission to make final decisions, either granting or denying applications. And I said, you should get any recommendations to the commission, in time for that deadline. And then last week, I received a message from someone who is working with OBI, someone actually from the education facilities department, who is working with OBI and reviewing our applications, and they're reviewing them under different, not the standards of the commission's rule, but the standards of, I think federal standards are driving a lot of this now, because there's the federal money that's come in. Well, the standards that apply to that, I think we've been informed are going to dictate some of the state spending too. Because
Russell, I may interrupt you for a minute. I just want to ask a question.
Yes,
so you said they're making their recommendations not based on our legal requirement, which is that unserved and underserved communities will be prioritized. Is that particular requirement being followed in their process?
I think we're gonna have to wait and see what the recommendations are like, because what they're doing is not giving the commission a different set of prioritization criteria to apply across the board, but they're looking at individual projects. And I think it's, they may apply the federal spending, the requirement that's attached to federal broadband infrastructure money, that the speeds of any spending, that of any of the speeds achieved by any of the federal spending have to be 100, I think 100 up, 100 down. I know it's 100 down, 100 down, 100 up. Another one, the speed is 100 millibytes per second download, and I believe it's also 100 upload, which is like basically fiber to the home type speeds. Although I guess some wireless can fit in with that as well. So they're going to look at the projects that may be a criterion. It sounded like that would be, that they would apply, period. And the reason for that is a lot of the federal infrastructure money will be used for what's called backbone. It won't be used for the last mile. Some of it might be used for the last mile. In other words, the line that gets you from the trunk or the backbone or the large regional set of cables or fibers that that branches off to serve hundreds or thousands of homes. They'll like the federal money might mostly be used for those backbones, and then our projects, the projects that we generally receive, or the applications we generally receive, are for projects to do the last mile, to serve more homes. And sometimes it uses an existing backbone, of the private carrier, but it could also use, in appropriate instances, in the right geographical area, it might attach to backbone that will be funded by federal dollars.
So let me ask you this: are we just getting some advice from OVI about what they would suggest about projects that we suggest for unserved or underserved recipients, or is there a blending of these two paradigms? One is for funding, one is for making sure it goes to the right people. What are we doing with the information they provide?
Well, in our conversation that we had a few weeks ago, they did bring up the speeds, but they didn't say exactly how they're going to approach their recommendations. And they said, we'll review the applications and see how they fit in to the overall scheme. So some of it might be based on geography, there may be some projects where the speeds are too low and they won't, they'll recommend against denying them at this stage. I think we're gonna have to wait and see, because they're sort of trying to make this work, given the applications they have in front of us, we have in front of us, and is now in front of them. And their ongoing efforts to set up a statewide broadband plan and to really figure out how many of the federal requirements they will be able to comply with, because there are in the federal law, states can apply for waivers of certain of the requirements that are attached to the spending. And so I think they have a lot to consider. So I think we will have to sort of wait and see exactly how they approach the recommendations. I think it's going to be application by application. But the thing about speeds might be apply across the board, because it sounded like they feel like they have to apply that across the board unless they're going to seek a waiver for the federal money. But there may be some applications, that because they're attaching to private backbone, or they won't be. We might be able to do that. They're sort of figuring those things out themselves, because they're dealing with.
Okay, I understand. But let me suggest that it may be maybe it would have been helpful for them, for us to identify our priorities of unserved and underserved communities, so they could work with that smaller population of applicants.
Well,
that
Madam
it's
Chair,
too
we
late
did
to do
identify, we have identified, and we actually provided like last year's order, denying and granting applications. And, you know, we provided them with our rule, and in a couple of discussions I've been involved in, we've said these are how the commission has prioritized applications. First,
for this year, for this year.
yeah, that we did last year and the year before. And I said, I expect we'll do again. Our rule doesn't require us to apply those, but it mentions that first criterion is something, you know, unserved versus underserved as something the commission is likely to follow.
Oh, wait, does the rule say we shall prioritize unserved and underserved communities?
The rule
How
actually
does it
uses,
shall? Does it?
it doesn't actually, when the commission amended the SRUSF rule in early 2020.
The commission amended it? Oh, the rule, okay. go
Yeah,
ahead.
the SRUSF rule, the broadband program provisions, and on a lot of other provisions of the SRUSF rule. As per my recommendation, the commission adopted less binding language.
What does the statute
for that.
say? What does the
The statute says
say?
nothing about prioritization. The statute, the RTA, the Rural Telecom Act, the section, the amendments that in 2017 or 2018 that added the broadband program say nothing about how the commission will prioritize projects. They just say you use an application process, basically. So our rule says, you know, something, I don't remember exactly the language, it says something about, you know, the commission may prioritize based on unserved versus underserved areas and other criteria. And the reason that the commission lightened that is because the commission had issued variances in the past for some exceptions to that, because you know, to really apply that prioritization across the board, that sometimes meant that the commission would be funding like a fiber to the home project that might be in an extremely remote area and to have very high cost per customer. Like I think you'll recall last year and the year before, there was like one project each year that had a very, like 10 times higher cost per customer than some of the other projects. And the commission decided, you know, not to grant those projects. So we've spent a lot of time educating them as to the commission's priorities, our process, and they're quite aware of that. But I think, you know, now the commission, you know, should listen to you know what they recommend when it comes to how to coordinate their spending with you know, federal spending and the. Even though there's no statewide broadband plan or not an updated one, it's, you know, they're creating it now. So they want to make these informal efforts until, you know, next year, when next year, the commission will have a rule in place, you know, by the end of this year, the commission will have a rule in place. We'll have amended the SRUSF rule to, you know, have formal procedures. And we've asked them to, OBI to comment in the record of that rulemaking as to what language they'd like to see in our rule. So there will be formal efforts, and they will have a statewide broadband plan, I hope, next year. And the Connect New Mexico Council is supposed to come up with more specific criteria for these defined terms that are in the Connect New Mexico Act, which are digital inclusion and digital equity. You know, that broadband access expansion efforts should serve those two goals, and they're defined in the statute. But one of their big tasks for the council is to come up with specific criteria to judge projects for funding based on like specific criteria to achieve those goals. And so that hasn't been done yet either. You know, the council is a very large group, a very high level group. So I'm impressed that they're even able to meet once a month, and they're getting themselves, you know, really getting going. But both groups, OBI and the council, you know, still have quite a bit to do. But I was happy that OBI is able to do the review, and they just need 2 extra weeks. So that the commission will have recommendations for coordination in this cycle. And, they do describe them as recommendations. And, you know, one question I have gotten is, well, is the commission bound by, you know, are we essentially going to does the commission take its orders now from OBI and the Connect New Mexico Council? And I would say this: they are calling them recommendations. That OBI is. They're not being, I say, too pushy about it. But I would say, we'll have to see what the recommendations are first. But I'm likely to recommend following their recommendations, because the statute requires us to coordinate with Connect New Mexico Council and with the statewide broadband plan. Even though that plan doesn't exist yet, OBI is the force creating that, and they are deciding, at least now, what criteria they have to have in this plan, to coordinate it with federal spending as well. And so they're the ones who are doing the statewide. They have a statewide view and are aware of all the information that's out there, like what the federal money, the restrictions on the federal money, how much state money there is, and they have a statewide broadband map. So I do think that the commission should take their recommendations because that's how the coordination will happen.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Vice Chair Maestas.
I had a basic question regarding funding. Now, our funding is separate and unique from the funding that the Connect New Mexico Council and OBI are going to be managing. So does that dictate some autonomy to our agency and the commission in coming up with continuing to use our own criteria with coordination with OBI and the council once they have a plan? Is there anything in there that gives us some autonomy? Russell.
Yes, Commissioner Mayer, I would say, it's the requirement of the law is for us to coordinate with them. That doesn't necessarily mean an entire new set of criteria comes in that overrides what we have in our broadband program rule. But there may be some criteria that we don't have in our rule that will come from OBI and the Connect New Mexico Council, that will override for certain applications, because based on what the spending plans that the state ends up having for the federal or state money, and possibly based on this 100 up, 100 down speed. Now, Mike has said that most of the applications that we received are 100 up, 100 down. So it's not like most, like the majority of the applications don't meet the criteria, but there are some that don't. And so, we've had a very vital discussion, especially Eugene and Mike with NMDuit about the fact that 100 up, 100 down might not be realistic for this whole state. And so, whether the state will also set that as a statewide requirement is unclear at this point, whether that will actually be part of the statewide broadband plan to require all spending to be like that. But certainly the federal money does require that at this point. And I don't know that they're seeking a waiver yet. So we sort of have to see how it turns out. We still have some autonomy, I think, in the sense that OBI and the council they don't seek to override all of our requirements. They think that, they think we have a good rule, and especially like the minimum qualifications, they're very good things for, sort of like for all projects. But there may be certain things that we don't take into account that they'll say you have to, like this priority overrides everything else. I think the speeds might end up being like that, just because of the federal money is so much money, and it might provide backbone for like a lot of other types of projects, including future broadband program projects.
Russell, it seems to me that our criteria is much more conservative than their criteria, number one. Number two, I think some of the federal standards require the integration or consideration into the statewide broadband plan of inclusion and equity. And I don't think they're even close to identifying what that entails and how to incorporate it into a statewide broadband plan. So my feeling is I'm not inclined to delay our process. I think this interim process of coordination, it's rushed. I believe it's overreach on the part of the Connect New Mexico Council because there is no statewide broadband plan. And I think one of the telltale signs of that it's rushed in that they're asking for outside expertise to review our applications from this representative from the Public School Facility Authority. And so I'm not inclined to support this. I want to stick to our timeline. We have one more bite at the apple next week to move forward to approve the project applications. We may have to delay the report to include the final decision in approving the project applications. So I don't think there's any question that our procedure, our process for ranking projects, it's tried and true. It's very conservative. In the last cycle, we turned away, $20 million, $25 million worth of shovel-ready projects. So I don't understand this. I don't understand why we're engaged in this interim process that in the absence of a statewide broadband plan that doesn't even have the equity and inclusion integrated into it. So, and I see that our funding is separate, unique, and apart from the funding that the Connect New Mexico Council is going to manage. And then a little frustrated because based on the memo, it seems that the meeting occurred on September 8th with staff from OBI and I think the Connect New Mexico Council rep. That was like almost a month ago. And I'm not inclined to support this delay. I'd like to go forward with our original process. And hindsight's always 2020. I recall in the session when the Connect New Mexico legislation was being deliberated and legislators were discussing composition. I asked that there be a representative from the Public Regulation Commission on the council to avoid this kind of, I don't know what you call it, but I'm not satisfied with this interim process, Madam Chair. And I don't think we should approve this delay. I think we ought to move forward. And then by next year, I'm sure that the Connect New Mexico Council will be established and settled. Roles and responsibilities will be established, and we'll have a statewide broadband plan. So that's my position, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Maestas. Very interesting. Does any other commissioner have comments on this point or any other point you'd like to make?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
Wow, the folks can hear me. I agree with a lot of what Vice Chair Maestas says. I think we're trying to rush to coordinate before we know exactly how to coordinate. And the emphasis on coordinating right now what we're spending is a drop in the bucket compared to what the federal funds are going to be, particularly what they're doing with backbone structure. So I guess I have a question for Russell. If we do this delay, Russell, is there any chance that this would push us over some critical timeline for implementing these projects and for the commission to approve whether we're able to coordinate or not?
That's a good question, Commissioner Fishman. No, this was only a 2-week extension. They said that they would set themselves a deadline of Friday at October 28th to have their recommendations to the commission, and then I would present the matter for final decision by the commission the following week, the following week's open meeting on November 2nd. And that doesn't, the proposed order that I've drafted, moves a couple of other dates accordingly. The motion for reconsideration deadline, where carriers can challenge, a denial of an award, and can also challenge, or anyone can challenge, the grant of any award to any particular that the commission has decided. That would have to be moved, of course, from November 1st, which under the rule, to well, I'm not sure the date that I have. I have to look at my memo to see what date it was used, but it will all fit within the, be completed before the end of the year. And under the SRUSF rule, no broadband project money would be, for projects that are awarded funding this year, would begin to be distributed this year. It's all next year. So as long as we finish the whole process this year, which we would, the commission would. I think you may recall, I think it was last year we had to extend deadlines because due to the fact that the Sacred Wind's petition for access reduction support, like payments, the special, the 2021 legislation that pertained to Sacred Wind, that was new, and the commission had to wait to find out what that amount would be in a separate proceeding before they knew how much was available for broadband funding, and that delayed things by, I want to say, 3 weeks. So this wouldn't be as much of a delay as that.
I've got you, Russell. So I guess where I'm standing on it is, I am very skeptical that there is anything that folks are going to come up with that's a rational change to the process we would be going through anyway. That it will be well thought through is, to me, very unlikely. So I agree with Commissioner Maestas. However, if it's a 2-week delay and nothing's going to be in danger, I would like to at least show the courtesy to give them the chance. It doesn't feel like we face any negative consequences as a result of the 2-week delay. So my tendency would be give them the benefit of the doubt, but if we don't get something clear, we're just going to end up charging ahead with our own process anyway. And if we get some rushed recommendations that we don't have time to think through, or that don't make a lot of sense, then obviously we won't pay attention to them. So I agree with Commissioner Maestas completely, but I'm okay with the 2-week delay.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. Any other commissioners have any comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I kind of had the same reaction that Commissioner Maestas had. This is just a rush process, and they're trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, and we can wait. They can wait. I don't see how this is going to change what the goal is, which is to getting broadband to as many people as possible with the money we have available. So I don't see the point in waiting. These companies they're really anxious to find out whether or not they're going to be approved and need to start preparing for the projects, especially with all the other delays that are occurring because of whatever reasons. So they're wanting to know whether or not to start ordering materials and supplies. And so I think we just need to move on and get these projects approved and get it cleared off our docket.
Mhm.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Byrd. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, do you have any thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have some information that my colleagues, I'm sure they're reading about it as well because I'm reading about it. And I think our broadband program is really inclusive as far as the funding is concerned. We have lawyers like Russell Smith, and we have experts like Michael Ripperger and Eugene Evans. Where can we go wrong? They know New Mexico. I've traveled with my staff members to areas where people are looking for some type of broadband services, telecommunication services. So that's a little bit of the background, but the United States Department of Agriculture, they announced back in July that there's over 100 million in broadband grants and loans that are that the broadband office should learn about. And there's also 150 million that is expected to broadband communities. And I think the new council needs to think about building the infrastructure, building the backbone with those type of funds coming to New Mexico. And I also read about 15 million coming to eastern part of New Mexico, such as Chavez and Colfax and Debaca counties, and then 6 million to Tularosa Basin, 3.6 million for the Continental Divide Electric Co-op serving Cibola and McKinley County. So the Council for the Broadband Office, they need to work very hard, work together, collaborate to see where these federal funds are going to match with the New Mexico state funds. And they have a load of work ahead of them. They should be concentrating on that. What we are approving are smaller projects that has been a vision by the telecommunication carriers for a very long time. They've been completing projects piece by piece over a couple of years, and they want to continue to expand the and utilize the Universal Service Fund to complete maybe a few more projects. So there's no way that broadband office can tell us to delay our process. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Well, it seems
Madam
like
Chair?
Yes, Vice Chair Maestas.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one follow-up remark, and I appreciate Commissioner Fishman's tact and diplomacy in, perhaps wanting to go forward with this 2-week delay. But I think the important thing that really applies at this point in the development of the Connect New Mexico Council and the broadband plan, and that is, I'd be open to them reviewing our selection process. And perhaps we can do that informally. We can have staff say, look, the commission, understands your emerging role. And we invite you to make any suggestions to our selection process, but I'd insist that they conduct that review of our selection process by close of business on Tuesday, to open the door for us to take action next Wednesday on our broadband project. So I'm willing to show some deference to OBI and the Connect New Mexico Council by inviting them to make recommendations of our selection process, but I'd insist that it be done before we act next Wednesday, assuming that we deny this proposed order to delay our timeline.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I appreciate that. And I would like to have a little more discussion on that. Commissioners, would you like to react to what Vice Chair Maestas has proposed?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
I believe that I spoke to our staff members approximately 8 months ago. There's a possibility for the PRC Commission to meet with the Office of the Broadband, and that invitation never sufficed. So they're not interested, and but they want to continue to collaborate with Michael Ripperger and Eugene Evans, and which is their choice, and that's what I have learned over the months. That's just my comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Commissioner
Madam
Fishman.
Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a question, Russell and Michael. Ripper, yeah, Michael's on. If we say no to this, do you see any downside if we go with Commissioner Maestas' suggestion?
I'll Mike, why don't you go ahead? You go first.
Okay, well, Madam Chair, Commissioner Fishman, I mean, there's a bit of, legal reading and how this collaboration should work. I mean, it's a little foggy. They are supposed to be able to provide some input, but I can't say exactly how that is supposed to work. We've certainly met with them several times, and we've given them everything. We've explained our process. I don't know what else we can do. It's all public information. I think they understand how we go about doing our business. And they have, different priorities based upon how they're to review federal grants. And I guess they want all this sort of stuff to work together. But we're not entirely sure what they have in mind. They have mentioned the broadband speeds. But I don't know where the interplay is how much they can dictate to the commission versus the commission take their advice and make their decision. So I really don't know.
Russell, would you like to follow up?
I would agree with what Mike said. I don't know of any specific, repercussions that would arise because of it. And I'm looking at the language of the statute, and Commissioner Maestas is absolutely right in the sense that the requirements for the commission to coordinate include providing applications to the council. And we provide them to OBI because OBI sort of also acts as staff to the council because the council doesn't have its own staff. So we've done that. But that's, it's for prioritization according to the statewide broadband plan, which, that we don't have. And so the commission can say, actually, we don't want to do an informal process in the meantime. We're working on updating our SRUSF rule to incorporate formal requirements and procedures, and hopefully we'll get input from OBI. They're aware of the comment deadline for that, and we just want to wait until it's formal because under the statute it refers to the statewide broadband plan. It refers to digital equity and digital inclusion, which are what they are defined terms, but they're defined generally in the Connect New Mexico. The Connect New Mexico Act and also in the amended Rural Telecom Act. But, the major task for Connect, the council is to provide specific criteria for that. And, they're still working on that. So I think, under the law, the commission is on solid ground to say, we're not going to we don't want to do informal efforts and we just want to wait until there's a plan in place, and the council and OBI have done what they needed to do to have something, that's binding and complete. So the commission can absolutely do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion.
good.
Yeah, I'll move to deny the potential order extending deadline for the commission's disposition of applications and related deadlines to coordinate with the Office of Broadband Access and Expansion and the Connect New Mexico Council. So this is a motion to deny.
Okay, I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Someone said something. Was that Commissioner Vicente Aguilar? Would you like to discuss?
No, I wanted to second that motion.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Any discussion on the motion?
Madam Chair,
Hearing
just
none.
one question.
Oh.
What effect does this have on the next action, which is taking action on the commission's report? Will that delay it until we take action on the pending projects? Because in reading the proposed report, it basically says that commission action is still pending on this year's projects. Russell,
Russell, can you answer that?
Yes, Commissioner Myers, the timing of the reports of the legislature, because it's due October 1st. Now, of course, because of me, we're already late on that. Has been, in last year was the first year we had a report according to the 2021 amendments due on October 1st. And, it did not include the particular number, which ended up being about $11.5 million available for broadband funding. Those decisions were made about a month later because there was more of a delay last year because of that Sacred Wind. The Sacred Wind petition had to be decided first before broadband program projects could be decided. So the report this commission submitted last year didn't have the final numbers for broadband program funding, what the commission had denied and what the commission had granted. And this would be the commission's decision right now to whether to grant an extension to allow for recommendations from OBI. Either way, if I wasn't planning to have the finalized information on this year's broadband program application spending in this report either, because we didn't last year. And then this year's update tells what happened last year. And then the report says, the amount that's available for broadband program funding may vary this year based upon, the other statutory obligations of the fund where they come in. But,
so Russell, if I may, so what you're saying is that we can take action on the report in its current form.
Oh, no. Well, I was going to say, Commissioner Masters, I recommend that the report be just like last year and say, we don't have the numbers for this year yet, but you should expect them to be about the same, because that's what we said in last year's report. Now, the commission could wait until, I could put that, I see what you're saying, Commissioner Myers, which is that if there's no extension for OBI, then I can have the commission's final decisions on the broadband program spending next week, because we do have the information from rural ILECs who receive access reduction support care payments, and from Sacred Wind to calculate their payments. So I can have the fund administrator get that, tell us before next week how much is available for broadband program funding. And then, the commission could wait until next week to adopt a report and could have those numbers. So you're right. Without any delays, this report could be more complete than last year's, because last year's had a longer delay. And so the commission submitted a report without that information.
Thank you, Russell. Madam Chair, if there's no other discussion, I'll call for the question.
Okay. Do you mean take a vote on your motion?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Michael, let's see. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. Michael, could you please take the roll call for this vote on this motion?
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
and Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, great. So from what I understand, Russell, you'll be coming back next week, or would that be 2 weeks thereafter?
Well, since the commission's deadline under the rule will remain October 15th, I believe next week is probably the only, the commission can always, move that itself, but, it sounds like the commission would like to move forward quickly, in a timely manner on that. So I will, find out from the fund administrator what's available and have that on next week's agenda. That's the 12th. Yes. Next week is the 12th for final decisions on that. And I will notify OBI, that the commission has decided that that the commission will go forward with, formal efforts, coordination, like making the rulemaking that's going on with the SRUSF rule. But will does not want to do informal, the informal recommendations at this point when there's no statewide broadband plan. So I'll let them know this.
Wonderful. Thank you. That sounds excellent. Thank you very much, commissioners. Well, we have Mr. Valdez with us now. With us now. And I would suggest that we return to that part of the agenda to hear his presentation. Is there any objection to that?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, Mr. Valdez. It's nice to see you, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, thank you so much for having me this morning. I look forward to providing any information that I can to bring this EV electrification plan to light and see where there's synergies and where we can work together to make sure that there's a successful rollout for the state of New Mexico.
I have a question for you, Mr. Valdez. Presented, we can arrange to have them shared on a screen here. If you don't, that's fine as well. I just wanted to double check.
Okay, and thank you, Madam Chair. I submitted my in advance, but I can see if I can upload it. Looks like they're bringing it up, my presentation.
Okay. Excellent, great.
I don't know who's running it, but if we could go, thank you so much. Madam Chair, members of the commission, thank you so much for having me this morning. I can jump right into the presentation. If we can go to the next slide, please. So New Mexico Department of Transportation has been tasked to take the lead in the building of electric infrastructure throughout New Mexico. And from a state perspective and a federal perspective, there's a number of buckets of funding that will be made available. In 2021, during the regular session, we received $250,000 capital outlay funding for electrification and infrastructure throughout the state, as well as a $1.2 million appropriation. That same year, under the special session, we were given an additional programmed funding of $10 million of ARPA funds for the sole purpose of electrification and expansion of our EV charging station system throughout New Mexico. So that's approximately $12 million that we currently have been working with from a state perspective. And in addition to that, we will be receiving over the next 5 years, $38.387 million from the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, which is federally funded through the IIJ funding source. Next slide, please. So what we've been looking at is a statewide strategy, how we're going to use ARPA appropriated state funds as well as NEVI formula funds. And one of the other that's not necessarily guaranteed, but available is our discretionary federal funds. In November of this year, there will be a NOFO that comes out that allows transportation agencies and government entities to apply for the first round of grant opportunities totaling $2.5 billion for the electrification of states throughout the nation. So on the first bucket with the ARPA, and the state funds, if you go to the next slide, what we've targeted is, looking at our DOT facilities. So we currently have 3 projects under construction. One project in Deming, another one in Las Vegas, and the other one in Roswell. Because of the need to move quickly with these ARPA funds, they're need to be spent within the next 3 years. We wanted to get these under construction. We're also taking a look at 82 statewide patrols around the state to see where those opportunities exist to build infrastructure on state-owned facilities, which are much easier for us to contract and use the ARPA funds. But we also wanted to take a look at, from an interstate corridor perspective, and we're looking at the NEVI funding, making sure that we prioritize areas on the interstates when we start looking at the NEVI funding. And as well, all regions, public and private. And so if you go to the next slide, with the ARPA funds, what we did is we went out and we put out a grant program that provided funding to communities around the state. The ARPA funds, because the NEVI funding will be focusing on our alternative fuel corridors, we wanted to make sure that these funding buckets really built out a network throughout the state. Rural communities are not eligible upfront for NEVI funding, so we wanted to make sure that we provided opportunities for disadvantaged communities around the state to get opportunities to take advantage of the ARPA funds. So we put this call out for projects in August, and we have just awarded 32 communities across New Mexico $5.1 million for the build out of DC fast charging stations. When you're talking about the differences between level 1, level 2, and level 3, what we want to make sure is that from an economic perspective, that we're allowing communities to have the motoring public who use EV vehicles to go in, be able to charge up, from an economic perspective, spend dollars within the communities, and making sure that it's not only about charging infrastructure, but it's also the economic opportunities for disadvantaged communities around New Mexico. And so that program closed on, and we have those award letters out. Those, like I mentioned, 32 communities. As well, we have the locations in Las Vegas, Deming, and Roswell that will use ARPA, as well as we have an additional $1 million that we will be targeting areas in Socorro, Reserve, Anthony, Williamsburg, Camado, Hatch, and Silver City. These areas were identified as energy deserts, which means that there's very little infrastructure out there currently. And so we want to make sure that we're also partnering with communities that allow the motoring public from electrification perspective to go in and be able to traverse this state and meet the requirements under the goals set by the administration. Next slide, please. If you look at this list of 32 communities, it's a tapestry of rural locations around our state that encompass what we believe is a good first round of awards that will help build out this infrastructure. When you're looking at communities like Columbus, Angel Fire, Old Caliente, Cuba, tribal communities like Picoris, Zuni, Jemez, and Santa Clara, these are all locations that we believe are critical to this build outs. Next slide, please. That was the ARPA. The NEVI is what everyone is talking about, the $38+ million. That's the funding that was provided on the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we received the formulaic funding for. It's a 5-year program. We were required as an agency to create a plan that was unique to New Mexico. So in August of this year, we submitted that plan to the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. What that plan really spoke towards was the uniqueness of New Mexico and the requirements that the stakeholders involved in the plan really brought to light. And when I say stakeholders, I want to make sure that everyone listening knows that DOT is not going on this journey alone. We had multiple engagement meetings with not only sister agencies through the state of New Mexico, a member of your own team, Ms. Mary Jane Parks, represented PRC, but we also spoke to energy providers, the co-ops, the big P&Ms, and we also brought in manufacturing of electric charging stations and industry to get an idea of what this was going to take to have a successful build out of this infrastructure over the next 5 years. So we submitted that plan. We put a plan together. It's available on our website. If you just type in the search engine NMDOT NEVI, it'll come up. It's approximately 100 pages. It's a little bit long, but it really does talk about our vision. And one of the most controversial parts of that vision is the de-designation of alternative fuel corridors. The NEVI plan requires us to build out infrastructure throughout New Mexico in a way that really promotes the electrification of the nation. But New Mexico is unique, not only geographically, but as you know, the energy capacity issues that New Mexico will face as we're getting towards the build out of this infrastructure is critical. If you go to the next page, to be fully built out along our alternative fuel corridors, you must build out infrastructure every 50 miles along the alternative fuel corridors. And I mentioned about de-designation. I'll talk a little bit about that here in a moment. Every 50 miles or within one traveling mile of the interstate within those 50 miles.
Mr. Valdez, can I interrupt with a question here when you talk about build out?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman.
So what level chargers are we talking about every 50
Absolutely.
miles?
Every 50 miles, and this is where it gets complicated and why I believe that the designation of over 2,100 center lane miles is not feasible for the state of New Mexico, because it'll require at least 4 150 kilowatt level 3 charging stations at each and every one of those locations. That means that it'll have a minimum station power capability at or above 600 kilowatts. I'll let that sink in for a minute. Level 3, over 600 kilowatt per charging location.
Mr. Valdez, does that include those locations you had on slide 6? All those small towns?
And thank you for that. No, so there are different level 3 charging stations available. And when you look at the charging stations that were, or the charging locations that were issued under the ARPA, we absolutely required the level 3 charging stations. But the lowest charging level for a level 3, which is DC charging, is 50 kilowatt. A 50 kilowatt station will allow you to charge within an hour or so of time and get at least 100 miles added into your battery. And so what that does is you can get in relatively quick and you get out relatively fast. And when I say fast, within a half hour to an hour with the DC fast charger, you're going to be able to do that. The 150 kilowatt is going to get you there even quicker. So it's actually putting electricity directly into the battery. It's not trickling like an AC charger would do. It's actually dumping that energy directly into that battery. When you're talking 50, you're talking 75, 150, of course, the higher the kilowatt, the faster it's going to charge up. The 600 kilowatt requirement is unique to the federal guidance and the requirements for the NEVI plan. We didn't want to do that. And one of the reasons why we didn't want to do that is because we're aware of the energy capacity issues that we'll be facing. There's going to be communities along those corridors that we believe will not require 600 kilowatt stations. We believe we can build out infrastructure that we can uniquely address the charging issues of each community in a way that we will allow people to get in, charge up, and get on their way without the guidance from the federal government of 600 kilowatt stations. So that goes back to the discussion of de-designation.
Can I just ask you a question on that one point you just made, though? You believe you can get people in and out, I guess, moving again on their trip without having the level 3 DC chargers. Is that what you said? I'm just trying to make.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we are only looking at level 3 chargers from a Department of Transportation perspective. When you're looking at level when you're looking at level 2, and if I misspoke, I apologize. Level 2 is AC charging, which is a trickle charge. That's going to take you from 3 to 4 hours of charging, and that makes sense for areas like, for example, hotels where people might be staying overnight, ski basins like Taos Ski Basin, Sandia Ski Basin, Pajarito, where they might go out to the mountain and spend 3 or 4 hours. But from a Department of Transportation perspective, we want to look at allowing level 3 charging stations to be provided to give them the access to DC fast charging. Now, the difference again is that 50 kilowatt, that 150 kilowatt, 300 kilowatt, all the way up to the 600 kilowatt requirements under the guidance for the 4 150 kilowatt direct current ports. So we will only be building out level 3 charging stations from a DOT perspective, if that clarifies your question.
And that also includes those small towns on slide 6?
Yes, and so many of those small towns, so every single one of those small towns received funding for a level 3 DC fast charger. Level 3 DC fast charger.
One charger or more than one? More than one charger?
Multiple port. Yes, multiple. Some will have 2 charging stations with dual ports, which will give them 4 ports at each locations. Others will be, there are some that we funded for 1 charging station in the smaller communities, but they will have dual ports. They range from anywhere from 50 kilowatt DC fast charging all the way to 150 DC fast charging stations with a multitude of manufacturers providing the infrastructure and the stations to those communities.
Okay. I see Mr. Fishman has a question.
Yeah, just following up. I'm a little concerned that 50 kilowatt chargers might become obsolete pretty quickly. And it seems to me that there's kind of a choice you face in a lot of locations. Do I do 4 slower chargers, or do I do fewer chargers but stick to 150 kilowatts just in case there's an obsolescence issue? What are the, obviously I don't have enough information to make a decision, but what are the considerations that you guys are looking at?
No, thank you for that. Absolutely. And one of the things is you're absolutely right. And there was a comment made, we presented in front of the Transportation Infrastructure and Revenue Subcommittee this week. And one of the comments that was made is that these 50 kilowatt stations might become the level 2 chargers of the future because they're only 50 kilowatt, right? And as you're looking at the technology advancing and changing, as these batteries are able to take on much more bandwidth in relation to electrification, we may be getting batteries. I mean, you look at the new Hummer, there's a all electric Hummer that's almost 300 kilowatt, right? Rather than, you're just a short 2 years ago, when you look at the Nissan Leafs, they were 30 kilowatt batteries, 30 kilowatt batteries. We just purchased Nissan Leafs at 64 kilowatt batteries. Tesla's got the 150 kilowatt. So it's a moving target, definitely. So that is one of the main considerations of why we believe we can't even consider AC charging, because that's going to be quickly obsolete. And we want to stick to the direct current chargers, understanding that the energy capacity issues need to catch up to, I think, the technology, right? So when you're talking about communities like Pike Town, New Mexico, Quemado, where currently there's going to be huge energy deserts that exist, I think the 50 kilowatts still gives us the opportunity to electrify those locations without the huge need to bring in, 480 transformers and electrical necessities into those rural parts of New Mexico. One of the benefits I believe that this electrification is going to bring that is relative to PRC is that it really is going to usher in the need to expand the grid and look at alternative energy sources to ensure that we're not facing the same issues that California was facing just a few weeks ago about asking people not to charge their electric vehicles. We have a tremendous relationship with PRC through Miss Mary Jane Parks, and as well with their co-ops and Alaric at P&M, really looking at it as a stakeholder, engagement that DOT can't just build out infrastructure without taking the energy capacity needs into consideration. So those 50 kilowatt, we believe, is that kind of sweet spot right now where we can't go any lower, but definitely here's quickly, we're going to have to look at even expanding those requirements.
So just one follow-up question. And Mary Jane, you might have a couple comments on this from your perspective. Are there situations where it makes sense because of the lack of infrastructure, which I assume is the lack of transmission and distribution capacity and transformers, is that are there places where it makes sense to literally build a solar farm and solar and battery facility to support these structures? And does that push those kinds of considerations into the planning of the grid? And Mary Jane, you may have more perspective on that than Jerry, but either one of you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Fishman. That's a big question. And I think in the short term, the U.S. Department of Energy and the state NEVI plan are looking at this next planning period to actually do the installations of the preliminary EV infrastructure and these charging stations. And the outlook for the short term is that utilities and the co-ops will be able to meet these needs. It's the medium and long range where we need to have this kind of conversation, and you as the PRC leadership are doing that. I think in the short term, the issues would be the supply chain, which Jerry, Mr. Valdez probably will be speaking about. The co-ops and the IOUs were in their public engagement with NMDOT. That was a main concern, is having enough lead time to get that transformer into the locations that the NMDOT was recommending. So Jerry, I don't know if you have other.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, yes. One of the and to just go back to the de-designation strategy that New Mexico is taking. When you look at this slide and you talk about fully built out, it's talking every 50 miles along alternative fuel corridors, 600 kilowatt stations. What our plan is to de-designate all New Mexico and U.S. routes that are designated. There's approximately 1,100 miles of U.S. and New Mexico routes that were designated as alternative fuel corridors for electrification, and an additional 997 miles of interstate miles. So what that does is, by de-designating the 1,100 miles of U.S. and New Mexico routes and only being required to certify or build out from a NEVI federal perspective the 997 miles, those 997 miles are all along the interstate corridors, I-25, I-10, and I-40. What that allows us to do is to be certified. And when you do the simple math, 1,000 miles divided by every 50 miles, it's going to be approximately 20 stations that are going to be required to be built out on the interstate. 20 stations. When we're able to build out those stations with the guidance and the requirements of the federal government and get certified, what that does, and if you go to the next slide, please. What that does for us, well, and I'll talk a little about RFP here in a minute. But what that does for us is that then the remainder of the NEVI funding becomes discretionary. And Commissioner, that's exactly what our goal is to look at alternative technologies that will help supplement the grid, and maybe consider emerging technologies around solar arrays that could provide energy to these one-off locations stored in batteries. There are companies that are creating charging stations that will collect the energy throughout the day. When a vehicle pulls up, they're able to charge, and instead of pulling off of the grid, they're pulling off of the battery that solar array charged. That vehicle drives off, and it begins to replenish and charge that battery. There's no way that we're going to be able to build 600 kilowatt stations with that technology, but by getting the 997 miles of interstate certified, then we could go out and use the remainder of the funds for alternative, innovative methods that really meet the unique needs of New Mexico, not Boston, not New York, not Florida, but New Mexico. We have sunlight, we have wind. Do we look at hydrogen as an option from the perspective of charging infrastructure rather than diesel and coal? And so
Mr. Valdez, can I ask a question before you move on a little bit? The slide I'm looking at is the one that says the federal cost share for NEVI formula program projects is 80%. Private and state funds can be used to provide the remaining cost share. Is this the slide you want us to be looking at? Because I was wondering what the percentage of the remaining funds after we build out the corridor stations you were just talking about would be left. Is this the right slide to be looking at?
It's not the right slide, but if we go a little bit forward.
Go to the next slide, please, Hans.
Thank you. And that talks about, so the RFP talks about that we're able to partner with private industry on this. The IJ funding does allow the private industries to provide the 20% portion of that cost share. And then owner and operation also goes over who will own and operate these stations moving forward. If you go over one more slide, public engagement, we come to these if you want to talk about it. The first 2 years and the final 3, 4, and 5 years is towards the end of the presentation. Let's see, let's go forward one more, Hans. There we go. So it talks about years 1 and 2, Madam Chair, and to your point, what's that going to cost, right? What's that going to cost? And that's a question that I get regularly is what is this going to cost? I know we have $38 million. I know what the cost of the infrastructure is in relation to the hardware, in relation to the charging infrastructure, right? A charge point station, 150 kilowatt, I can buy for $50,000, $60,000. Where it becomes complicated is the cost is going to be relative to the energy source and how close that energy source is to that infrastructure. And so every single location is going to have a cost associated to getting the energy to that location. So one of the areas that we've been working towards is looking at site analysis and condition analysis in relation to where there are energy sources that already exist. For example, when you go east of Albuquerque along I-40, and you're looking at communities like Moriarty, Santa Rosa, Tucumcari, San Juan, where are their energy sources? Where are those points along the interstate where we don't have to build out infrastructure, where there's already energy and power? And so we anticipate worst case scenario, and I'm hoping that this isn't the case, 20 locations, $1 million a location. This is not the case. That's going to be cost us approximately $20 million. That'll give us the remaining 18.3 million just on the formula funding to do alternative build outs and fill the gaps on outside of those alternative fuel corridors. We're estimating that it's going to be closer to $15 million, which would then in turn give us $23 million to use discretionarily. And so that the breakdown is roughly going to be right around that $12 to $15 million for years 1 and 2 to build out the infrastructure on our interstates, which then if you go to the next slide, Hans, years 3 and beyond, then we'll prioritize infrastructure discretionarily in areas that are disadvantaged, taking advantage of tourist and economic opportunities, and of course, looking at Justice 40 as a requirement to make sure that communities are not left behind. And this isn't about putting charging stations where there are people and the early adopters who could not only afford, but really the social economic disparity between rural New Mexico and urbanized areas, that we're taking it into consideration, that we're not just building where people are driving. We want adoption. We want to put it in communities where people really feel like they can now purchase an EV vehicle because they have infrastructure in place to get on the road and use it just like any other New Mexican can, not just building it where the current early adopters are living.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valdez. Any commissioners have questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Vice Chair Maestas.
Thank you, Jerry, for that presentation and your leadership on this really important project. I might have missed it, but there was a question about the 20% match on the NEVI program. It's an 80-20. So has that been secured by the department, or is that going to come through future legislative sessions?
So one of the strategies that we're taking is that we're looking at going out for RFP here in the next 2 months. And if we go back to that RFP slide, Hans, you can take a look at the RFP right here. What our goal is, Vice Chair Maestas, is to work with private industry in communities to allow them the opportunity to contribute to 20% cost share, to really allow them to take ownership, operation, and maintenance over. The DOT has no intent on getting into the EV charging station business. But what we do want to do is partner with communities, allow the private entities who have interest, and there's tremendous interest from not only construction companies, but private industries. I can give you, for an example, Allsup's convenience stores for one, just to mention one, McDonald's from restaurants perspective, Lowe's, Home Depot, any type of private industry. And why not Bruno's restaurant in Cuba? Those are all individuals that have approached us. We're not in an RFP, so I can mention those names. We want to allow them the opportunity to participate, take ownership, operation, and manage these charging stations on behalf of the state and take responsibility. The provisions of the bill do allow this. And from a long-term sustainability perspective, like it mentions here, it really is in our best interest to partner with communities and private industry to allow them to participate and use this as economic engines in their communities.
Thanks, Jerry. And, we tried to get ahead of this whole effort to ensure that the DOT would consider the approved transportation electrification plans by our investor-owned utilities. So does that alleviate some of the demand for these direct current fast chargers? That's my first part of that. And then the second part is, as you know, I see these new exclusive Tesla chargers going in. In fact, I think in Socorro, they just built a new one. So is the plan also considering not just the transportation electrification plans, but the locations of these exclusive Tesla chargers?
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Maestas. So it is not considering Tesla because they're on a closed. Again, the average driver cannot access those without they're Tesla chargers. What we'd love to see is that Tesla puts it out on the open market and allows the others can use those charging stations. So currently, as we're building out, we're not necessarily looking at that as existing infrastructure, understanding that that might change, right? And in regards to working with the state transportation electrification plan, we absolutely want to partner. A number of the awards that went out to a co-op in northern New Mexico who are very proactive in building infrastructure from a co-op perspective. So we would not be opposed, and we are in fact working with the energy providers to see where it makes sense to really use them as a resource in this build out as well.
My last question is, are there any existing smartphone apps that are out there to help EV owners find electric charging stations? And if not, is there any plans afoot for developing such an app?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, there is actually a website that the DOE has put out, and we're actually piggybacking off of their website that shows all existing infrastructure. And I can share that with the commission so you can see what that looks like. And it has every single charging station, every level. It breaks it down from Tesla. It breaks it down even to the manufacturer, charge point, juice box, because so many of the apps that you pay require you to have the app on your phone to pay at the time of charge. So that exists, as well as PlugShare is another application that exists to give kind of a mapping as well of where that infrastructure exists. There is not one central kind of official app that really is recognized, but I think the PlugShare and the DOE, which is a government site, are the two most reliable in showing the public where there is infrastructure, where it exists, and even to the degree that it gives you the cost of charging per kilowatt per location and at what level that charging occurs at.
Thank you, Jerry. That's all I had, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Maestas. Other commissioners have any comments or questions? Well, I had a question, Mr. Valdez. I interrupted you a while ago, and you were beginning to say that you're looking at hydrogen. I think that was in connection with a discussion about how would you power these stations. Well, I'm not sure whether it was in remote areas or not. And I wanted to understand what you were going to say there.
Madam Chair, thank you for that. And what I was alluding to is that by allowing us to get certified on the alternative fuel corridors, which only include the interstates, and by freeing up the additional discretionary funds that will be associated with NEVI, we're hoping that it's going to be upwards to more than $20 million. We want to look at innovation. We want to look at options such as solar, wind, or hydrogen, if it exists. Going out for
I have a question. Is it hydrogen required in order to get that extra 20% support? Do you have to look at hydrogen? Is that a requirement?
No, we do not. Although alternative, innovative is part of the approved for discretionary. So under discretionary, we can look at it, and definitely it is something that we will be taking a look at.
Would this be green hydrogen or all types of hydrogen?
Madam Chair, and because we're still looking at going out at an RFI to see what technology exists, I don't have that information, but that would be in years 3, 4, and 5. So it's something that we would begin looking at even before the certification of our interstate systems to get ahead of that.
Okay, thank you. And one other question I had about the Tesla stations. You say they've made them available for use by others. Don't those consumers have to have an attachment or something to attach to their, or is it a universal port?
Madam Chair, they are not universal. They're at this point, they're not universal, and to be able to utilize a competitive charging station, you would need those adapters to
Adapter, yeah.
Even Tesla couldn't charge at a traditional charge station without an adapter. And so the federal government and the Biden plan is looking to standardize those charging ports in a way that will really change the game for drivers in the United States.
Okay, thank you for that. And I remember one last question. This $20 million we'd like to get, did you say 20 million or 28 million?
Madam Chair, we're going to get $38 million, a little over $38 million. And whatever is left after we build out those 20 locations along our interstate will be able to be used discretionarily. So we anticipate roughly on estimations of approximately $20 million discretionarily. But that is a guaranteed formulaic fund that is available that will be coming within the next 5 years.
So do you have a ballpark idea of how many other stations can be built once the interstate ones are?
Well, we're building out approximately, Madam Chair, the ARPA grant funding that just went out, we're building out 32 locations with a minimum of at least two ports per location. That cost us approximately $5.1 million. 5.1 million at a minimum of 50 kilowatt DC fast charging. That gave us 32 locations, $5.1 million, all level 3. That number, of course, is fluid based on the energy capacity of the locations we're going into.
So extrapolating from that, if we spend $5 million and get 32 locations?
32 locations.
And we'll be getting $20 million more to spend if we get the discretionary money?
So the NEVI funding we will be receiving. It'll be able to be used discretionarily. And I want to kind of clear that distinction, because in November, we're also able to apply for discretionary grant funding from a separate funding source that we will be looking at as well to help communities build out their infrastructure. But the 38 million NEVI is formulaically apportioned and approved by the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We will that we don't have to compete with, but there will be discretionary funding that will be made available as well through the discretionary grant funding source. But when I say use the NEVI funds discretionarily, that money is already appropriated to the Department of Transportation for the next 5 years.
I see. Well, I mean, it sounds like we could be looking at maybe 150 stations at that kind of value if that continues that way. That's a lot.
Madam Chair, we're excited. We believe that with the NEVI, ARPA, as well as our intent to go after additional federal funding that is made available from a grant perspective, that we will be successful in working with community stakeholders and industry to build out a viable electric vehicle system in New Mexico that'll contribute to the national system as well.
Great.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
Just one point of clarification. The Tesla stations are not available for charging other vehicles, correct?
Madam Chair, that's correct. They can charge, when we talk about adapters, they can use other charging stations with an adapter, but the Tesla stations are only for Teslas. They're not open.
Oh, thank you for that clarification. I thought I heard him say something different, Commissioner Fishman. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah, great. All right, any other comments or questions for Mr. Valdez, commissioners?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your time today, Mr. Valdez. So kind of a related but side issue. What is the department doing about the tax deficit and resulting defunding of your transportation budget due to all the new electric cars coming online?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Byrd, thank you for that question. Because as we're promoting the electrification and the adoption of EV vehicles, and what you're referring to is the road usage charge, right? When people stop putting gas in their vehicles, what that really does is it cuts into the highway fund, and it cuts into the ability of us to be able to maintain our roads. So absolutely, that is a question that is on the forefront of, as we're working towards electrification, what happens to the road usage charge? And so we are part of RUC West, which is a consortium of Western states that are looking at that issue. We're looking at it from the perspective of where those fees will come from in the future. Does it involve, in some of the options that we're looking at, does it involve, increasing the registration fees of electric vehicles to make up the difference? Does it include use as you go from a GPS perspective, right? As people are driving, how do we measure through, Oregon, you put in a little chip into your vehicle and it tells you how many miles you've traveled. But then that opens up a whole nother discussion around privacy and kind of government intruding into the private lives of our citizens. So it is definitely something that we're looking at from a RUC perspective. We don't have an answer today. The adoption rate of 5% of vehicles in New Mexico being either hybrid or fully electric is getting to the point where it has to have a serious discussion of how we're gonna address that shortfall as adoption increases. And so we have a team working on that and working with the Western states to see how we can address those issues. It is important to our agency.
Is that the extent of your question, Commissioner Byrd? Or do you have more to ask?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Vicente Aguilar? Anything?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Valdez, thank you so much. This has been very interesting. I'm sorry we grilled you so much, but as you can see, it's a topic that's really of great interest to us. So thank you so much for being here, and I wish you the best.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And just to let you all know, if you need anything from us at the Department of Transportation, or if you have follow-up questions, we definitely want to have a strong partnership with all stakeholders. And the PRC, through the work of Mary Jane Parks, has definitely been a strong relationship. We didn't really go into details about the public engagement, but I believe the PRC was well represented with the work of Mary Jane. And we look forward to working with not only PRC, but all other stakeholders relative to making and driving excellence in this initiative for the state of New Mexico.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for those kind words about Mary Jane. We know about her. She's excellent, and we're very proud of her. So
well, thank you.
Thank you for letting others know as well.
Thank you, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you.
It's and the stakeholder input at those public engagement meetings from every members of the public and the co-ops and the IOUs was the heart of the meetings. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I would like to see how the commissioners feel. It's 11:24. I'm willing to go on, and I see Judy Amer is ready to present on case number, what is it? Which case, Judy? 21-281, is that what you were gonna present?
Commissioner Hall, members of the commission, It's case number 21-00177.
177, that's right. Okay. So, commissioners, how would you like to proceed? Does anybody need a break at this moment? If not, we can go on with that case. I don't hear anything. Yes? Okay, I think we're fine. Judy, let's proceed.
All right. Patrick was going to do a screen share of the exhibit C of the proposed rule, and I won't go through the entire rule again unless someone requests me to. I was going to talk about the changes that were made from last week. And if you go to rule 17.5.440.9, D like in dog, 2, there was a question from Commissioner Hall regarding what kind of notice was utility division staff going to have to give the commission or commissioners after they reviewed a 440 filing. Right now, staff has no particular requirements. They accept them and they look at them, and occasionally they make comments to them, but there's nothing formal. And the new rule takes that a little, creates a little more of a formal process, but not so formal as making staff file a report. The new rule says upon filing, utility division staff shall review the report. And this was the part that we had a discussion on. Notify each commissioner. And then Commissioner Hall was asking, well, how are they going to notify us? And we started to talk about perhaps there might be, if it becomes a pending adjudication, there could be ex parte issues. So it's revised now to read, and I'll just read it. Upon the utilities filing of a report, Commission Utility Division staff shall review the report and notify by email the utility, Office of General Counsel, and individual commissioners of statutory, regulatory, or feasibility issues, if any. So that's really the only change, that it's by email. It's that they need to communicate what issues they see to the actual utility, OGC, and individual commissioners. So I'll stop there, and I'll ask the commissioners if that correction or revision is acceptable.
Judy, I'll just make a comment, is that I believe that there were 12 440 filings by P&M in the last year, and that none of them had issues. So in kind of formalizing this piece of the puzzle, it's not like we're adding a lot of work. It's just we're defining the process. In fact, it's hard to say we're adding any work. So.
Well, yes, I would agree with that. I hope that staff would also agree with that.
So I'll just repeat your invitation, Judy. If anybody has any concerns about that, and this would be the time to speak up. And Judy, were you able to communicate with staff on this issue, or are you invited for comment now?
Well, the record is closed.
Oh, that's true. Okay, so this is for commissioner's comment. And I'm not hearing anything. Commissioners, just because I made the suggestion doesn't mean you can't say anything about it. But I personally think it's fairly minor requirement, but I think it's professional. And it's helpful to notify commissioners about what's going on. I get lots of email, but I don't think this would add to it too much. Okay, well, hearing no comments, I think you can proceed, Judy.
The next issue and I also can do a screen share of a spreadsheet that was prepared by Commissioner Hall's assistant, Colin Gillespie, if you would like. But the next issue was whether or not the $8 million is the right benchmark for another notification by the public utility. This is in D, like in dog 4 of the same section we were on, which is 17.9.440.9. So we're on D4, and it says a public utility shall notify each individual commissioner by email when it files a report or amended report with estimated or actual costs of $8 million or more on a total company basis. And Commissioner Hall, would you like me to have a screen share of the spreadsheet?
Sure. Yes, I think I like pictures as well as words. So yeah, it's useful.
I did provide that to Patrick, so I think he could do that. And okay, there it is. And I think,
well, it's a spreadsheet with some graphs as well.
Graphs as well, correct. Yeah. I really think that the bottom line is that after doing research, $8 million is in fact a fairly good benchmark because Colin was able to determine that most of the projects are under 8 million, and only I think it was 23% of the projects for all the utilities were over 8 million.
Judy, do you want Colin to go through the graphs? Would you be more comfortable with him doing that?
He can, if he'd like. I think if you look at the pie chart.
And look at the bar chart as well.
Yeah, the bar chart might show it better.
So Patrick, can you slide I think you have to go sideways. Why don't you have, let's see, yeah, scroll down then. Maybe it's down there. I don't know where, yeah.
It probably would be better, but he was able to determine that the average price was 8.5 million and the median price was 2.5 million. If you see that further up on the spreadsheet. But Colin, do you have anything in particular you'd like to point out to the commission?
Yes, Judy, Madam Chair and Commissioners. If Patrick, if we can go up slightly to the count pie chart. Yeah, right here. So this is data taken from the 2020 440 log that we have internally. And it's a little hard to see the figures on the screen here. But 82% of the number of projects are under $8 million. We also did a similar analysis with PNM data going back to 2017. It appears as though 8 million is going to be a number that will have the commission notified about once a month on average per year. We don't think that that will be overly burdensome. And then we also, if we can go to the top, Patrick. Yeah, if we can go to the top right there, you can see the highlighted figure for 2020. The average project cost is about $5 million, and the median is only $1.5 million. That's because there are a lot of projects that are around $1 million or $2 million. And then if we did look at PNM's data, that figure for the average would be about $8.5 million, and the median would be about $2.5 million. But as it is, we have a 5 million average for 2020. Of course, with supply chain issues and inflation, costs are going to be going up. There's lag times. We heard about this in the special open meeting from the IOUs. So overall, the commissioners thought that it was that 8 million was a good figure here. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Commissioners.
Thank you. I would just add in, just to make it really easy to look at this pie chart. The purple color is under $3 million. And then looks like the sort of brownish red rust color is $21 million. Is the $3 to $8 million. So if you add up the purple pie piece and the rust colored pie piece, that adds up to about 60% that of the projects that would not come across our desk. We would only get the 40% of projects that would come across our desk, maybe once a month, and we would expect them to be bigger deal projects, not as simple as the lower cost ones.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
a little clarification. That's the dollar pie chart.
Yeah.
So in terms of number of projects, we would want to look at the number of projects pie chart that Colin put together.
Sure.
And actually, it'd be over 80% of the projects we would never receive notification on.
That's fine. So we're only looking at 20%.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay.
Yes.
Well.
So the takeaway is that the 8 million is actually has very sound actuarial science behind the number, and but I'm opening it up to any commissioners who would like to discuss this. It's not being changed from what was in our discussion last week. Okay, with that, I'll go on to the next.
Well, Judy, let me just toss in. I asked for this a little bit of analysis to be done, just so the commission could establish that we did have some data supporting that figure. So it wasn't a number we just pulled out of the air. However, Commissioner Fishman, I guess, because he's such an experienced and talented executive with numbers and costs, was able to kind of discern that with his own intelligence. We lesser beings, well, at least this lesser being couldn't figure that out. So I needed to see numbers.
You're digging a deep hole here.
Okay, I'm done. Okay, moving on. We're in 17.9.440.9E, duty to amend report. And there was a discussion about whether or not to have the amended report be attached to any utilities request for rate recovery for that for anything in the amended report. And so we added a little 3 that says the amended report shall be included with the utilities request for rate recovery. And I think that that is a fairly not a very onerous change. It just makes it more transparent for interveners and staff to be able to have that information right up front. So do any commissioners have any questions about that? Or statements or comments? I don't hear any. So moving on, now I would request that we put on Rule 592 for screen sharing. Because there was one issue regarding that. And I would request that we would be looking at 17.9.592.15 safe harbor. And Commissioner Estes raised a concern about the phrase and meaning of existing right-of-way. And going through the record, on July 14th, 2021, there was a notice of inquiry issued. And one of the questions was, please explain your interpretation of the term existing right-of-way as used in this Rule 17.9.592.15. EPE answered, quote, existing right-of-way are land rights in place and in use by a transmission facility. P&M responded, the existing right-of-way refers to an associated right-of-way for the transmission line or plant in question, as well as any contiguous rights-of-way. SPS responded, SPS generally interprets this to refer to any existing ownership interest, applicable easement, or other legal grant of right-of-way permit or other form of landowner approval or agreement related to the transmission line, distribution facility, or corridor in question. And staff responded, staff believes that this would be the right-of-way that the transmission line is currently built on. After discussion, it is proposed now that staff's interpretation comes the closest to the intent of Rule 592.
Judy, I'm sorry to interrupt. Does staff say it's currently built on or operating on? What did you say?
Yeah, staff believes that this would be the right-of-way that the transmission line is currently built on. But the only issue is that the Safe Harbor Rule number 15 relates to more than just transmission lines. It also relates to plants, generation plants.
Mm-hmm.
EPE's interpretation is good, but the word land rights in place might be vague. P&M and SPS's interpretation continue the present rules' lack of clarity as to when a safe harbor claim may be properly made. Thus, the commission proposes to add the line, and I'll read it. The existing right-of-way shall relate to the existing plants or existing transmission line, existing right-of-way, and shall be in place at the time that the safe harbor claim is made. This hopefully would would avoid a utility establishing a right of way and claiming a safe harbor simultaneously and saying that it was existing. And I'll stand for questions on this point. And also I'd like to hear from Commissioner Maestas as to whether or not that addresses his particular concerns.
Thanks, Judy, Madam Chair. Yeah, it does address this issue that we encountered last year in a specific project. So I'm okay with this new language.
Any other comments, questions? With that, there were no other changes, and I went through the entire rule last week, and I can go through it again, but the proposed order would adopt the amendments that I just went over and the amendments that I discussed last week. And with that, I stand for questions.
Commissioners, does anyone have any questions for Judy or any comments you want to make?
Madam Chair, I'll move the order.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion, any further discussion on this rule? Hearing none, I think we should take the roll. Judy, can you, or Hans, who does it? Michael?
I can do it. Commissioner Byrd,
Okay,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
The order is approved by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you very much, Mike. Excellent job, Judy.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to item number 8. This is case number 22-00214 UT in the matter of the Commission's 2022 annual report to the legislature regarding the status of the State Rural Universal Service Fund as per section 63-9H-6Q of the Rural Telecommunications Act of New Mexico. Russell Fisk is going to present this potential order adopting the report to the legislature.
Madam Chair, I move to table this. I believe it's consistent with the discussion that we had in item number 7. And that is to allow staff to incorporate next week's actions on the pending broadband projects. So
Yes.
Okay. And
Yes, I agree. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I would table it until the next meeting.
Thank you, Vice Chair Maestas. I was about to suggest the same thing. So, so that's a motion. You made a motion, correct?
Yes, I did.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And I believe I remember Commissioner Byrd informing me once there's no discussion on a motion to table. Is that correct, Commissioner Byrd?
As far as I know, it still is.
Okay, so Mike, can you please take the roll on this?
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
and Commissioner Byrd.
Yeah, why not? Aye.
The non-debatable motion to table is approved by a vote of 5-0.
And why not?
Thank you very much, Commissioners. All right, we'll move on to our discussion section of the agenda. And we have item number 9 is case number 22-00020 UT in the matter of the implementation and administration of a community solar program. And Commissioner Fishman, Arthur O'Donnell, and Russell Fisk will present this discussion matter concerning advice notices for community solar tariffs, forms, and agreements filed by the 3 qualifying utilities. So Commissioner
Madam
Fishman, would you
Chair?
like to start out?
Yeah, just a quick lead. I know that there were issues, I believe, with all three advice notices. And I thought it'd be good to just get a quick overview of the issues that have come up from Russell, and I'm not sure Arthur's here today, but that's all that I just wanted to be sure the commission's informed about the issues that have come up.
All right, so is Russell gonna carry the ball then?
Madam
Arthur
Chair,
is here, and I could carry the ball by simply reading Arthur's. We've done a written report on it, but I think it'd be better if Arthur is. I know he's on for him to discuss them because he's.
Yeah, I see Arthur.
Okay, good.
All right, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Commissioner Fishman and Russell, thank you very much for the opportunity. There are actually a number of things going on with the implementation of the community solar program in New Mexico. Rising to the top are recent filings from the three utilities to put into effect the tariffs for what we call the solar bill credit. And as you know from the act and the order that the commission has finalized, the solar bill credit is a fundamental economic driver for consumers to participate in the Community Solar Act, right? Such that under the terms of the bill that we kind of put into practice, the utilities needed to identify their total average revenue requirements and make some subtractions from that would include the distribution costs and some other factors. And the residual of that would be the solar bill credit. And this is the mechanism by which the utilities would provide a bill credit to subscribers to community solar projects, right? So it's a reduction of the revenues that the utilities get. And then the consumers, the subscribers, would pay a fee, undetermined at this point, to the subscriber organizations, that is the owners and operators of the community solar projects, right? And under the order that the commission approved in late March and finalized in early July, the utilities are supposed to file these tariffs by September 12th. And there have been some delays, but anyway, this month, the utilities have all filed something. Now, the form of the file is actually generally three components. One is the actual calculation of what the solar bill credit would be for each of the applicable ratepayer classes. And this is not just residential consumers, but also small general service consumers, municipal utilities, anybody else that could be a subscriber for it. And so there are a number of tables that the utilities have provided with the calculation of what the solar bill credit looks like. There are two other elements of the filings that the utilities made, which include forms and agreements, right? A prospective form between an agreement between the utilities and the subscriber organizations, and a form for sharing of customer information, which is a key component of how this program works. And then finally, the utilities also filed requests for rate rider treatment. And this would be for costs that could be calculated as some kind of subsidy between non-subscribers and subscribers. And then the commission has identified the policies surrounding that. The big problem that we have is that contrary to the order that the commission issued and contrary to the intent and language of the act, SPS included the transmission costs as part of the delivery cost and subtracted that from the solar bill credit. Now that has a significant impact on what the solar bill credit looks like. It would essentially subtract about 3 cents per kilowatt hour from the solar bill credit. Now that could seriously impact the economics of projects in that territory. Neither of the other utilities did that same kind of calculation. So that is one problem that has been identified. And I'll just say that as per commission policy, the tariffs are now in the hands of the utility division staff for analysis. And we're anticipating an analysis of these filings, hopefully for consideration next week, and what the commission can do about it. So I'm not going to go into detail about that. That is one big issue. The second is that the forms that the utilities have provided are all inconsistent. There's no consistency among them. And it would be really good if the commission separated out consideration of those forms and tried to get the utilities to come up with a standardized format for the agreement between the utility and the subscriber organization. I will note that generally the utilities are calling these power purchase agreements, and each of the utilities is claiming ownership of the energy and capacity that comes from the community solar projects as part of this agreement, which clearly goes beyond the intent of the Act and our rule. The Act specified that the utilities would take possession and ownership of the renewable energy certificates, right, that are associated with the renewable power from these projects, but it does not convey ownership of the energy and capacity to the utilities, except in the case where unsubscribed energy is held for over a year, and then the utilities would purchase that from the subscriber organization at their avoided cost rate. So that's a key problem that I'm seeing in all of these agreements. There are other terms in there as well that if you will note that just this week there was a protest of these filings made by a joint group, including the Coalition for Community Solar Advocacy, CCSA, and the Renewable Energy Industry Association, that asserted that their reading of these agreements actually is dictating the relationship between the subscriber organization and the subscribers. And that's not the utility's job, right? The commission has established the policies for this. And so that's part of their protest among some other issues, okay? So there are some problems. And what we'd like to see is to get the utilities together with commission staff or consultant to hammer out a consistent and acceptable set of forms and agreements. The third element of the filings are these rate riders. And in particular, the proposal from El Paso Electric is problematic in that they are attempting a rate rider which essentially cuts the solar bill credit in half, right? The utility has identified what it calls unavoidable costs, and they would like to put that into a essentially an account to be considered as a regulatory asset to be recovered from the subscribers of the community solar projects in the future when the commission, when these projects go into operation. That again is something that is clearly beyond the intent of the Act and the Commission's rule, because in the order that the Commission finalized, we identified these potential costs for deciding whether they amount to a subsidy and whether they are subject to a 3% limit on cross-subsidization, really refer to program administrative costs. And the utilities are not administering this program. As you know, the commission has hired a third-party program administrator to reduce the burden on the utilities and to essentially take them out of the business of administering the program. And also and costs associated with interconnection. But the commission's finding in the order was that interconnection costs should be recovered through the interconnection process because there are fees associated with doing an interconnection request. Okay, so essentially, my reading of it is that El Paso is trying to claw back money that would be provided to the subscribers in the form of a solar bill credit and recapture that later on. Now, the effects of that are significant. They're even more significant than including the transmission costs, right? Because essentially the calculation that El Paso has provided is half of their prospective solar bill credit, right? Their solar bill credit is on the order of 8 cents a kilowatt hour, and they're looking at these quote unquote unavoidable costs as almost 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So there's a significant problem in that. The other filings also have some problems, including imposing some monthly minimum charges that need investigation. And again, putting into the rate riders some things that the commission and the act never really intended. All right, I don't want to go into the detail on that because it really is something that we want to see what the utility staff is coming up with in terms of their analysis, and would hope to have a further discussion of this at that time. What my suggestion is that the commission may consider essentially triaging these elements of the utility filings, right? Russell can go into the nature of the filings right now, but you know, in 2 cases, the utilities filed them as applications. PNM filed it as an advice notice, which is the proper way of doing it. The commission went back and told SPS and El Paso to refile them as advice notices. So that part of it seems to be taken care of. But really, what's important is getting the solar bill credit determination quickly and expeditiously so that the developers of these projects essentially know what their economics are. The secondary, the forms that we're talking about, the agreements between the utility and the subscriber organization, don't have to be done right away, but need to be in place by the time contracts are signed under the solicitation that the program administrator is going to be conducting in early 2023. The rate rider issue is really an outlier, and that does not have to be in place at all until these projects are operational, which would be late 2023 at best, or perhaps into 2024, depending on the logistics of actually getting interconnected and up and running. So my suggestion in this case would be for the commission to consider essentially dealing with the solar bill credit as a tariff, right? And doing that process, which is rather expeditious, waiting to see what the utility division staff has to say about them, and then addressing those issues. Having a process for the utilities to confer with the commission as to a standardized subscriber organization agreement, which I would term as a participating generator agreement rather than a power purchase agreement, but that's to be determined. And letting the program administrator work with the utilities in terms of the access to customer information, which is something that the program administrator in Climb has already put on the table with the utilities and could be working out, so that we take care of those. And then deferring any action on the rate riders and this special accounting proposal that El Paso has put forth to applications, right? We could use the same application numbers that the utilities filed, but I would also suggest consolidating those issues into a single proceeding for administrative efficiency purposes, so that both the commission and interested stakeholders don't have to be in 3 places at once, right? So that's essentially kind of what we're looking at in terms of this. First and foremost, however, is the issue of SPS's non-compliance with the commission order. And to me, that is a very serious situation, because this issue about treatment of the transmission costs was very much part of the deliberations in the rulemaking process. The commission again and again established that the intent of the legislature is quite clear, right? And yet SPS has filed essentially taking the same position. Yes.
Excuse me for a minute, Art. I apologize for interrupting you. I'm just thinking we're getting into a realm that's sort of legal discussion, and I was thinking that Russell needs to be part of this conversation. Could we have him address some of these issues that you've valiantly shouldered?
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'm
Yeah.
finished anyway. I've identified the major issues that I see on this. And so
Yeah.
Russell can put it into the proper legal context.
Madam Chair, before you turn it over to Russell.
Yeah.
um,
Yes, Vice Chair Hall, Vice Chair Maestas.
I wanted Arthur to discuss another issue that is germane to the subject in the matter of implementation of our community solar program. And that is the appearance that utilities are backtracking on the processing of interconnection pre-application reviews for prospective community solar projects. And it's not specifically listed under the discussion topics, but I think it's germane in general to the captioned agenda item. So maybe before we hear from Russell, Arthur, do you mind just briefly addressing this issue, which is kind of interfering with the implementation of the overall program and presenting problems to our third-party administrator? So do you mind speaking to the interconnection issue?
Yes, Commissioner Maestas, and thank you for the opportunity. This is something that just was called to our attention this week.
Excuse me, just let me clarify. Can I ask a clarifying question, Vice Chair Maestas? So this is a question that is outside the scope of the filings that we have right now, correct? Commissioner Maestas, was that your intention?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Now,
Okay.
I'll leave it to you, Madam Chair. I mean, we can come back to this discussion after Russell talks about the filings so that we don't get confused on issues, or I can proceed under Commissioner Maestas' request.
Well, I trust that you could keep the two issues separate, Art. I believe he was going to talk about the administration.
Okay. Incline has been meeting with utility representatives to work out logistics of the program. And unfortunately, in the past week, the utilities appear to have changed their position on a very crucial element, which is the processing of pre-application reports or system studies that are, under our rule, a prerequisite for bidders, right? It's one of 5 prerequisites, minimum qualifications before they could be selected as community solar projects. Now, this issue is complicated by the fact that, as you know, we have deferred interconnection issues, right? The ultimate interconnection process to whatever rule is in place at the time that these projects are selected. Okay, so we are undergoing a rulemaking in interconnection that is hopefully reaching the home stretch of consideration, but it's not done yet. And so there's a little bit of fuzziness as to what rules apply. Utilities are now claiming that they cannot process pre-application requests from prospective community solar developers because that rule is not in place, okay? It's a problem because, again, it would delay the solicitation, which we anticipate being issued as early as December 1st, until the finalization of the interconnection rule. It's also troubling in that just 2 weeks ago, when both Christopher Hall and I participated in one of these sessions between the utilities and Incline, there was no indication that this was a problem. In fact, the utilities had indicated that during the course of this year, they've already processed literally scores of requests for pre-application reports. And even though they did not have a specific pre-application process, they would be using the FERC SGIP process, right, to just provide a cursory, can you put this project here in this location without incurring a lot of cost type of analysis. PNM has said that it has over 500 megawatts of these studies already done. SPS said that it had over 600 megawatts of these projects already done. And now they're telling us that they can't do any more, which puts certain categories of project developers at a severe disadvantage because they would not be able to meet the minimum criteria under our current schedule, right? Because the utilities would be processing it. But also it's the nature of those projects. Those are likely to be the smaller community-based developers who are working with other developers. They could be, municipal projects, they could be anything else, who had to wait to see what our process was going to be. Whereas a lot of the commercial developers went ahead and requested interconnection studies under the old rules. So it's a little bit of a mess. And I don't want to talk about exactly what the commission should be doing about it right now, but I did want to raise that as an issue. And I would hope that the commission can make a strong statement to the utilities not to get in the way of this process by raising artificial barriers. So that's my basic description of what's going on.
Thank you, Art, very much. I appreciate it. Questions for Art, commissioners?
Madam Chair, I was made aware of a recent case where a utility company was doing that very same thing, basically putting up barriers to implement community solar. And I believe that particular utility was fined. Arthur, can you speak to that case study?
Well, I don't think we should ask Art to discuss.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Matters that get
don't
into
have any
legal
information about that. So
what I'm concerned about here is that while Art is providing us very important understanding about what the problems are, we shouldn't be trying to ask him questions that relate to legal matters. I
understand, Madam Chair, and I guess before we turn it over to Russell, we're going to have to take some quick actions to address these because based on the proposed timeline for the RFP to solicit projects for community solar, it's coming up very soon. And I don't think it's in the best interest of New Mexicans that stand to benefit from community solar for us to delay the implementation of this important program any further. So with that, maybe we can hear from Russell on some of these issues.
Great. If there were no other, Commissioner Fishman, before we go to Russell, did you want to make a comment?
So I just wanted to heartily agree with Commissioner Maestas, which I seem to be doing a lot lately of. And since it appears that every step the utilities are taking does obstruct implementation, we have to take a very aggressive stance that we're not going to put up with any artificial delays, and we don't want to give those efforts any momentum. So I think whenever we see one of these obstacles coming up, we have to act very quickly to remove them. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you very much for your comments. Commissioners, any other comments before we move to Russell? Hearing none. Russell, would you care to proceed?
Yes. I don't have much to add to what Arthur said. He has a very deep understanding of these issues, and I agree with him. And I agree with Commissioner Fishman that the utilities are getting more and more creative in how they're obstructing this matter. I mean, it's just clear that they are. Each of the utilities did something different with its advice notice filing, which suggests almost some sort of coordination to try every way possible. One of the AP filed only an application. They had to be ordered to file an advice notice. SPS filed a docketed application and an advice notice, and PNM just filed an advice notice. It's interesting that turned out that way, but I agree 100% with Commissioner Fishman. And the motion, the commission denied the motion, the SPS's motion to stay. SPS filed the same motion to stay with the appellate court, which I pointed out is improper. The court doesn't consider motions to stay afresh. The court does a limited appellate review of a commission or a lower court's denial. They give some deference to the lower court's decision, the agency's decision, and they recognize that was wrong, but they haven't fixed it. So there's no stay in place. And if there were a stay, it would be a stay of all implementation efforts by the commission anyway. So there's absolutely no possible legal excuse for SPS to file a tariff that deducts transmission costs. I mean, that's it's an outrageous flouting of the commission's rule. I mean, it was as Arthur said, it was a central issue. And I think there are some other issues that Arthur described that, may amount to more like flouting of the rules or obstruction, and some of them, but there will be issues also that will just be complicated issues that have to be worked out. But yeah, the obstruction efforts are clear. This will go, yeah, Madam Chair.
Well, I just wondered if, is there more to say really on this subject at this point?
I can summarize, I can just conclude right now. This will be coming, I'm glad that the commission is getting this preview, because next week, October 12th, is the deadline for, that's when SPS's advice notice will go into effect, because they filed on September 12th. And so we will have staff's memo on that by the end of the week. I've spoken to Ed Rokoff, our somewhat new chief of staff, and to Brad Warman, and said, we need to coordinate, because staff will give independent recommendations, as they always do, with regard to any advice notice. They will review it under the rule. But because Arthur and I, but especially Arthur, are very familiar with issues not only regarding the community solar program itself, but the implementation and like where we stand and with things, and how what incline needs and when they need it. We'll probably have recommendations. We'll do a presentation right after staff, probably for each of the advice notices of further recommendations. And you've heard a little preview today. So we'll be digging into all this next week in a very deep and detailed way.
Okay, thank you very much, Russell. I really appreciate all this information, and thank you, Commissioner Fishman, for bringing it to our attention. It's important to know what's going on the ground in real time. So let's move on then to let's see, I guess we're at Roman numeral 10, communications with chief of staff. I don't know, I'm not sure I see Mr. Probst in the meeting.
I'm here, Madam Chair.
Oh, good. If your name doesn't appear, I think then your face will soon. Okay, and I'm not seeing him on the screen.
If my face doesn't
there
appear,
you are.
Madam Chair, you can consider it to be your lucky day. Madam Chair, good afternoon. Nice to see everybody. Just on the last topic, there are some administrative implications as well related to the implementation of the community solar rule. I know staff is generally aware of those, but I've asked Renata to prepare to put together an email that we'll send out just to remind all of us that there are some administrative implications in terms of implementing that as well. So, and collecting those fees. So I hope that we'll have that out to you today. If not today, it certainly will be out to you by tomorrow, Madam Chair. The only other things I have on my list to cover today, Madam Chair, is just a reminder that Monday is a holiday, Indigenous Peoples Day, so our office will be closed on Monday. And also last week, Commissioner Vice Chair Maestas had asked us to put together a list of potential legislation to be considered during the next legislative session. Just wanted to let you know that we are working on that, and I hope to have that a preliminary list to send out to the Commission for your input on anything that we may be missing, and have that brought back to the Commission in the next at the next meeting, or the no later than the meeting after that. And with that, Madam Chair, happy to discuss any other issues that the Commission has on its agenda for today.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Commissioners, does anybody have any questions for Wayne? Hearing none, I think we can move on to the next item, communications with General Counsel.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I believe Hans wants to present information about the logistics related to preparing the open meeting agenda for next week in light of the Monday holiday, and also he will be out of the office at the end of the week preceding.
Oh, I see. Okay, fine. That would be very helpful. Thank you very much. Hans, take it away when you're ready.
Yes, Madam Chair. In addition to Monday being the holiday, and we are down to the last 2 weekends of people taking time off for fall festivities as well. I will be out of the office Thursday and Friday, and other personnel in OGC will be using their fall festivity administrative leave time this Friday. So I'm asking we will attempt to post the agenda for next week by 12 o'clock on Friday. So a little bit shorter of a deadline than normal. So I'm asking for any and all agenda items be given to myself and Lori as soon as possible, so we can prepare that and have that ready to go to post by 12 o'clock on Friday.
Okay, thank you very much. That's useful to know. And then with Monday off, that we have Tuesday to prepare for the Wednesday meeting. Well, I hope everybody enjoys their time off. It's a beautiful time of year, and I'm here in Albuquerque, and the balloon fiesta is in full swing. So I hope people can take advantage of it, of the time, so you can come and see it or do whatever you want to do. See the beautiful trees around Santa Fe. It's a lovely time to have a break, and it's so well deserved at this juncture that I really do mean this wholeheartedly. I hope staff can get a short, if unfortunately short, but a break from our pretty hectic pace. So thanks for bringing that up, Hans. So we'll move on to communications with commissioners.
Oh, Madam Chair, can I just say something quickly?
Oh, yes, please do.
Oh, I think I mistakenly referred to Ed Rokoff as our new chief of staff. Obviously, he's our new utility division director. I think I said chief of staff, just to correct myself there.
Oh, okay. Fine, thank you. So, okay, communications with commissioners.
Madam Chair, before we move on to that, I had a question for Mike. You know, about a year and a half ago, I think we revisited our processes for putting the agenda together, and with a focus on ensuring that all appropriate attachments were already developed and available on the Friday before the next meeting. And I realize, you know, we're dealing with a lot of, you know, kind of human resource issues and staff vacancies, but there seems to be kind of a consistent trend of late documents coming to the commission. We either have to kind of review them either on the Monday or the Tuesday prior to the Wednesday meeting, or be forced to deleting that particular agenda item. And I think we've agreed to do that if we don't get documents or attachments within a couple of days of the meeting. But I just, maybe Mike, if you can talk about what OGC is doing to try and deal with some of the resource challenges, so we can maybe hit the reset button and ensure that we have attachments ready by Friday, and if not, no later than maybe close of business on Monday.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I think that's one of the issues we, myself included, as part of that, have had a number of vacancies in the office and absences. And I think we, as Commissioner Hall alluded, we have a lot of things that are coming in sort of screeching towards the end of the year here. And I think there's been I want to say a hopeful, posting of things on the agenda with the aim of getting those things on the agenda so that they can be addressed by the commission in an orderly fashion. And sometimes that doesn't match up with the reality of quite frankly, of trying to prepare an order, that really in a memo that addresses the matters at hand in full in a, you know, a well thought out manner. But I know that, you know, we're right now, we have recently, you know, hired Lori to fill our spot that was vacated by Isaac's passing, and Hans is still involved in preparation of the agenda materials, you know, because he's trying to continue facilitating that while you know, staff is being trained on how all this function, you know, how our office functions in terms of preparing the agenda. We also have been working on trying to hire 2 new attorneys to fill the vacancies that have been longstanding in our office. I guess all I can really say is that we are making the effort to get things on the agenda so that we can keep things moving forward, and we will endeavor to try and get those materials to, in a final form for you by the Friday.
And Commissioner Maya says, I have been the worst offender in this area. Even today, I had to boot it. So I am resetting. I'm pressing my reset button right now. I'm giving myself a reset.
Thank you, Russell. And thank you, Mike. That's all I had, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Maestas. I was feeling your sort of the same feelings that were concerning you several nights ago, but honestly, I have to say, listening to Mike's description of, you know, it's basically a strategy of trying to get at least the opportunity of more rather than less cases on the agenda, kind of opens my mind to the practice more than I had. And he probably said that before and I forgot, because of course, like all of us, I want to be prepared. So I start to get kind of anxious when I don't have memos. But on the other hand, I do get that strategy. So it may be that might be a good way to go, because we need to get as much done as possible. And if it's a device that creates some, I don't want to say pressure necessarily, but you know, it's a goal that is being aimed at very strenuously by General Counsel. I would hate to take it away, you know, by putting a case on the agenda that they're not 100% sure they can actually really fully present to us. I don't know. I appreciate that. I understand what they're trying to go for. So I guess I would just say it doesn't trouble me too much, really, now that I understand the philosophy behind it. Anyhow.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Fishman.
So a suggestion to make here, because I agree. It's gotten tougher lately to be ready for meetings because some of the stuff is coming in so late. And sometimes you like to have a day or two to kind of let the issues, again, I'm kind of a muller, and I like to let it sift through my mind a little bit. And it takes a day for an issue to even occur to me after I've read it. But if OGC, when they're aggressive about putting something on the agenda, would notify us at the time that it's on the agenda about whether the information will be coming in late, the supporting documents, that would be helpful. At least that way we know why it's on the agenda, and any commissioner can always, ask to postpone it. And that way everybody knows where everyone's coming from, and we've got clear communication. And we don't end up forcing consideration of issues that we're not ready for.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good idea.
So we can do both. And so if OGC could do that, that would be quite helpful. And, maybe that allows us to get the benefits of all philosophies on this issue.
It is nice to at least know what might be coming up next. So there is some value in seeing something put on the agenda, and then even if it's pulled off, we know it'll be likely to come up the next week as well. So, I can't emphasize enough how I appreciate how difficult it is to be in that office, especially when it's understaffed. So, but having said that, we still have to get through the work. So all I can say is thank you to them, and thank you for Russell for offering to reset. Let's move on from here now. Let's go on to communications with commissioners. Do any commissioners have anything they want to bring up? Okay, Commissioner Fishman.
I'm just going to, I'm going to be traveling. I'm going to a free market seminar, a free market academic group on regulation. It's in Aspen. So, it was an excuse to get my wife up to Aspen, us, get a little time off as well. But I will be probably difficult to contact at times during the next few days and through actually through Tuesday. So just letting people know.
Well, thank you very much for letting us know, Commissioner Fishman. I've been to that session once, and it's a very lovely place. If you're driving, that's probably good. I flew and it snowed and everybody's flights were messed up. But otherwise it was very interesting. But I don't know that you'll get the time off you want, because they keep you busy from whatever time we start, 9 till 5, and they're serious about it. So,
well, actually,
your wife will have fun.
Well, we are driving, so it's going to be Thursday, and actually through all of next week, because after the conference, we're going to take a couple days.
Yeah. Oh, good.
So anyway.
Well, does that mean, are you going to be able to attend the meeting next week? Do you know?
Well, I'll find a way to log in for that.
Okay.
So I'll let you guys ruin my vacation a little bit, but not too much.
Join the club. Okay, great.
Commissioner Byrd doesn't want me there anyway, so
He's going to be working, Commissioner Byrd, I assure you. In for a rude awakening. Okay. Well, do any other commissioners have any comments or anything they want to share? Okay, hearing none, I do. I don't know if you all were able to find time with all the other things we have to look at the last minute to look at the documents that were sent out to you that relate to an issue that came to my attention, brought by the chair of the Colorado Commission, Eric Blank, who generated a document that is comments to FERC, because FERC has opened up actually a number of dockets in their effort to try to deal with the issue of what the developing interest in establishing RTOs in the West. And this is the interconnection docket that relates to this issue. And in particular, the problem that is being addressed in Commissioner Blank's comments is the problem of management of queues in RTOs. And for those of you who are listening who don't know what I mean by queue, it's the line that project proponents have to get into and wait in before analyzed for its success in being integrated into the RTO grid. And I don't recall if Art mentioned Q in his comments today, but you have heard discussions of queues associated with our interconnection of our grid here in New Mexico. And the problem exists at a larger scale with RTOs. And it's an issue of particular interest to states that have renewable energy mandates, such as our Energy Transition Act, or some other Western states have greenhouse gas emission requirements, mandates that have to be met by other utilities, in their footprint. It's of particular interest to states that have these clean energy mandates because while RTOs are designed to maximize the efficiency of operation of the transmission system, thereby reducing costs to all participants, and which reduced costs are then transmitted as benefits in lower bills to consumers. RTOs are not designed to be supportive of any one type of resource. They're resource neutral. So to the extent renewable energy projects are being mandated by states that require utilities to meet certain benchmarks of acquisition of renewable energy and then sales of it retail in their states. If utilities are a member of an RTO, their projects will not have any more priority compared to other projects in these queues. And the result of all the development and interest in development in the West, particularly of renewable energies because of the commercial opportunities, is that queues in Southwest Power Pool, and actually I'm not sure it's just a Western phenomena, it may be happening farther in the East, but we have 6 states in the West, which is a larger percent of this. 6 states in the West have these renewable mandates, and that's a larger percentage, I think, 6 out of 11 states is a much larger percentage of states with this type of mandate than I think in most other parts of the country, with the exception of New York State and California. But in any case, the queues in in Southwest Power Pool and in California are predominantly filled with renewable energy projects because all the projects are backed up, but a large number of renewable energy projects have applied to interconnect. So the result is there is a lot of renewable energy projects in the queues, but and a demand for renewable energy driven by the mandates, the state mandates, but the queue process takes some time. So the FERC's docket was opened to request comments from parties to offer solutions to how to speed up the queue methodology. So Commissioner Blank suggested his solution, which is interesting because he suggests that the federal system kind of look to the example provided by state methodology of selecting projects based, as many of the states do, based on a competitive process, such as we use and they use in Colorado when a utility issues an RFP requesting bids and then reviews the bids and picks the most cost-effective project. Commissioner Blank is suggesting in these comments that that selection process is something that an RTO can rely on in part to be able to identify the best project to select in the queue. And he compares it with what has been used already, which is initially it was whoever was first in the queue would be looked at next. So if you're number one in the queue, you're looked up at first, and then number two is looked at next. That process had been changed somewhat to whichever project is ready first would be the one that would be analyzed next to see whether it would otherwise satisfy the system impact studies that all projects have to go through. Commissioner Blank's suggestion is that using first ready is still not the best solution because you may be ready, but you might not be the most cost-effective project. I don't know that he actually uses the phrase cost-effective. He discusses the problem of of projects trying to move through the queue as an economic concept of scarcity, arguing that getting a position by a project on the queue is really should be looked at as a situation where you have an overabundance of applicants trying to acquire a scarce position on the queue. So that was the basis for him suggesting that this should be looked at as an economic problem, and that the solution is to try to use the most effective product for solving the scarcity issue at any given time. So in any case, I thought his comments were meritorious, and I was kind of dismayed to see that, we received this last Friday, and they want our response back by this Friday. And it was too late to get this matter on the agenda. So I'm bringing it up now because I wanted to at least understand whether any of the commissioners are interested in signing on for support, because Commissioner Blank is seeking support from, commissions across the West, and he would like our support. And we can sign on in various ways, but for us to sign on as a full commission would require a vote, which we cannot take today. We'd have to take it next Wednesday, and that would be later than the deadline that Commissioner Blank would like to have our response. So Commissioner Maestas had suggested that just he and I sign just to avoid a quorum, but indicate support for his comments. And I would like to just ask the commission, whether you would like to proceed that way, or if you, would rather not sign on, or if you do want to sign on and would like us to submit them late, we can do that. I believe I should, I guess, consult with Ms. Amer, but in the past, I know this agency has filed comments late. But there was a request by Commissioner Blank to try to get the comments in by Friday. So get our support statement sent in by Friday. And I guess they provided a sample letter to use as well. Maybe I should ask Judy. Judy, is it possible, do you know, in this case, to be able to submit comments late?
Commissioner Hall, members of the commission, I haven't looked at this docket. That are we going to be submitting our own comments, or are we just going to be commenting that we're signing on to somebody else's comments?
My thought was just to sign on to Commissioner Blank's comments. They were his idea. I thought it was a creative and probably productive idea, but I don't know how comfortable other commissioners are given the short time frame to scrutinize this. If you had a chance to jump on it and read it, like obviously Vice Chair Maestas did, that's great, because I jumped on it and read it as well. But I basically wanted to invite other commissioners to give me their reactions, and we could decide how to proceed from there. But I was not intending to generate further comments. We did, well, actually, that reminds me, I did send this to, and I got an opinion, a 2.5-page opinion from our contract economist, who did say that he supported the idea, although he thought that some of this one sentence that was proposed as a FERC rule amendment by Commissioner Blank raised issues that he thought were antitrust issues. But in conversation with him and Commissioner Blank made it clear that he didn't know whether it did or not. He wasn't familiar with antitrust law enough to know whether it did, but he was simply trying to offer a solution the way that the question was presented by FERC. And personally, I think whether or not there are antitrust issues is a problem for FERC, not us. So I really don't think that's something we need to worry about personally. But so I'm offering, I'm asking the commissioners how they feel about supporting these comments. Should we just have Commissioner Maestas and Vice Chair Maestas and I sign them? We can sign them as individuals, or if others want to sign on, we can do that, assuming that we can file comments late as a group. Otherwise, I believe we could each individually sign, a statement supporting these comments if they want to. So that's why I asked the question, Judy, and I apologize for putting you on the spot there. I thought that I had put that question to you before. Maybe I didn't.
Yeah, and I would think, and I don't know for sure, that if you're signing on to comments that were timely filed, but you did the signing on untimely, that would probably be okay. But if you're trying to add new comments after the deadline, I would think that their rules would probably allow them to not consider them.
Oh, I see. I remember once, way in the past, years ago, you had said something about how we could always file comments late. You can always file comments out of time, but I wanted to re-ask you that question.
I don't know whether they're obligated to look at them. Do you see? I see. That's the distinction.
I see. All right. So that's where we stand. Commissioners, any reactions?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd feel comfortable if commissioners just want to sign on as individuals and you want to submit the letter timely. So, if you want to get together individually with commissioners to do that, I think that's fine.
Okay. Commissioner Maestas, are you all right with that? Okay,
sure
yes. So this is a question then, because Michael Smith, if 3 commissioners sign individually, does that work?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I think the way it's presented right now is problematic from an open meeting act perspective, because essentially, obviously a joint action by 3 commissioners who constitute a quorum of the commission is a commission action. So if you're all signing off on the same letter as quote unquote individuals, I think that's potentially a distinction without a difference, because that's an act of a quorum of the commission. If each commissioner writes a separate letter expressly states that they're acting on their own, that I think might be, each commissioner always has the ability to do what they want to do with respect to taking positions. But I think it would have to be clear that that's an individual act of the individual commissioner, not one that's pursuing, a consensus or representing a consensus of a quorum of the commission.
Okay, and is it possible to do what Commissioner Maestas had suggested to me in the first place, which is to have he and I sign a letter, and then Commissioner Fishman could sign a separate one, right?
First of all, I would not be signing this letter. I've got kind of technical concerns about the process, so that's not even an issue.
Oh, I see. So you're not intending to sign?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So if 2 commissioners want to sign on an individual basis or acting individually or submitting a letter in support of it, I think that's fine.
Okay, great. Problem solved. Okay, thank you very much. That's all I had. And if there are no other comments or questions or things to share with the commissioners, I'm not hearing any. We're adjourned. Everybody have a good weekend.
See you guys.
Thank you.